All right, the kit comes with the standard Imperial Guard transfers. That seems to be the the thing that comes with any Guard armored kit. You get some numbers, some letters, a few words and phrases, and some other things. I don't even know in lore what any of these are, so I just tend to stick some on that I think look good. I've got my usual tools. I've got some hot water off camera here, tweezers, knife, brush, paper towel, Q-tip. Now, something I always try to keep in mind is that the markings on any vehicle are going to get weathered. They may be painted on. If they were real world thing, they're generally going to be painted on, or they're going to be some kind of sticker, some kind of vinyl transfer that goes on some other material. Generally, it's going to be painted, though. A lot of times, it'll be hand painted actually for some markings, but they're going to get weathered. And you can, of course, chip over them with paint and using other chipping techniques. You can physically damage them. You can put streaks and dirt and oil and things like that on them. You can paint over them to change the color, to vary the colors and to add a few more tones and stuff. One of the things I like to do is just get my knife and just scrape away some of the decal. I'm scraping this very gently because you can scrape too much. If you get too zealous with this, you'll scrape off enough of the decal that it loses, of the carrier film actually, that it loses its integrity, and it can be very difficult to work with. Now, one way to mitigate that I use from time to time, if I remember, that's one of the hardest things as I get older. Sometimes I just forget the things that I once knew about the hobby, but one of the things you can do is overbrush it with just an acrylic gloss. I generally use Future for that, and that will hold it, that will give it enough integrity that, if you let it soak in water a long time, the Future's going to come off. But you get it wet enough to slide off there, the Future will hold that together, and you won't have any problems. But you can see here, let me grab this and refocus, hang on. You can see here that now I've got some chipping on that decal. I'm using this decal set and fix from VMS. The only thing I haven't liked about this so far is it's got the little squirt lid on it. I like dipping my brush down into it. I feel like that way I only use exactly what I need. So I just pop this little lid off, and then when I'm done, I'll put it back in there so that it won't hopefully spill out. But I'll get a little of this on my brush and brush this on. Now, this just helps, of course, the decal settle down on the surface. I just paint that on fairly liberally like that. Let's see if it evaporates before I can get back to it. Now I just take my decal. You've seen me do this. I take my decal and I hit it in the coffee water here. It's not coffee water, but it's warm water, coffee warm. Now let's see if I over scraped it and have to deal with trying to get that to work. Nope, did all right. Sometimes I over chip it, and I don't put the Future on it, and you have to start dealing with lots and lots of little pieces that go everywhere. But now I'll just take this. Is that straight? I am bad about getting decals straight. And there's some you want to be straight. I think some of the times when you're hand painting, when you're wanting them to look hand painted, that it's okay to have them crooked. But this one I want to look more stencil-like. I guess a stencil could be crooked, but anyway. I'll just roll that out, getting all the air bubbles out. And there. Now I'll let that dry a little bit. You can see right here where I scraped it that it only scraped it down to the white underneath. I didn't scrape far enough through, so I'll need to go back later with some paint. And if I want that to look like it's all the way through, you can leave it like that. You know, that works too. It looks damaged, so that can work. Now I'll use some of the VMS decal softener, and I'll just paint that over the decal that I put on. I gave it a little bit of time to dry between the time that I filmed applying it and putting this on. I had put on the rest of the decals on the hull, so it was probably 10 minutes that I waited. I like to wait a little bit between the two steps, so about 10 minutes. And I just put that on. Once I get the decal softener on, I don't touch it. I wait for it to dry because it's starting to work, and if I put it back on there, it may smear the decal. So if I want to put any on, I wait until this is dry and the decal is firmed up a little bit. And there you can see I got that decal on, and I just used a couple of them here on the sides, and I did that on both sides. Now, bubbles silvering, bubbles underneath the decals, sometimes called silvering, that's just part of decals. I think sometimes people think that if they get bubbles or if they get silvering, it's a failure on their part. Yeah, there's ways to mitigate it, and sometimes you can completely mitigate it and not have any silvering. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have some silvering. I chose not to gloss coat this. I know I'm going to get some silvering, but I know how to mitigate it. All you need to do is either take the tip of your hobby knife or a needle and a pen vise, and where you see the silvering, just poke a little hole in it and put some more solution, some decal softener on it. That'll take care of it. You can even paint chipping over it. You can paint over it. You know, there's a lot of ways to take care of silvering. So don't get freaked out if you see silvering. Now, if there's a whole ton of it, yeah, you probably needed to put some more decal solution underneath it, some water, something. You needed to work it out a little better with the Q-tip, something like that. But if you do have silvering, don't panic. Just take a few simple steps to deal with it. I just expect it. When I'm doing it like this, when I'm doing it over a matte surface, I just expect it, and I deal with it, and I move on, and I don't worry too much about it. Now, once the decals have set and dried well, I take a little bit of Vallejo matte varnish that I've thinned down with water, and I'm just going to brush a little bit of it on over the decals. Now, I'm not doing this to knock down the shine. Later weathering is going to do that. I'm doing this to seal them in so that any of the washes that I put over it or anything like that, if there's any little gaps underneath, it won't run underneath the decal. I'm still not entirely happy with the tracks in the state they're in. I keep looking at these things and I think those look like some kind of rubber pads. Some tanks have padding that's kind of a hard rubber, hard plastic, hard composite for these cleats like this. So I think the first step to getting them to a state that I like a little better is I'm going to paint this with Vallejo German Gray. I'm going to use some Vallejo Neutral Gray, and I'm just going to sponge on some of that color. And what this is going to do is it's going to represent both scuffing on that rubber part, or whatever material it is, and some worn metallic scuffing on the metal. And I don't know that I can get too heavy with this, because with the tank rolling over it when it's moving around, it's going to do quite a bit of damage and scuffing. Okay, I'm liking that better. Yeah, most of it's going to get covered up with mud, but there'll be a little showing through. I think it better represents metal that's got a little bit of rusting to it, but also some scraping that goes through the rust back to the metal, but it's dull metal because of use. And then, of course, the black has some scuffing on it because we know that a hard rubber, a hard plastic, or things like that, those things get scuffs too. So I'm a little happier with this now. I want to do a little more to sell the notion that the metal is metal. So I'm going to grab this Vallejo Rust Model Wash, and I'm just going to apply this on here very liberally. I'm going to avoid those cleat areas and just focus on the metal parts. What that's going to do is it's going to further reinforce the notion that the metal is metal and the cleats are not. I'm putting this on kind of heavy, but it's going to dry much more transparent than when I apply it. Just using a cheap liner brush, because that way I can be precise because of the nice tip, but the body of it is long enough that it holds a good amount of wash, so I don't have to constantly go back to the palette. Alright, some areas of that is still drying, but you can see how when it dries, it's a lot less transparent than when I first put it on, but it just reinforces the notion that the metal is metal and those cleats in the middle are not. Another thing I like is by using that gray paint that I did for the sponge chipping on the metal and the black parts on the areas that I applied the rushed. I go in Sean Connery mode every time I say rust wash. It stains that differently than the underlying paint, which was sort of more of a rust color. So it provides just a barest bit of distinction between the two, and I think it just further sells the notion. These Vallejo washes are becoming my absolute favorite weathering product. They're so useful in so many situations. If you've never tried them, if you see a couple of bottles at your local store or want to pick some up online, I highly recommend it. They are very, very flexible and useful in so many situations. And I'm going to paint the barrel of this bow gun and also this machine gun with lead belcher. I'm just going to completely coat it and add some texture in later. Now I'm going to use some Rune Fang steel, another Citadel color. This is a brighter silver. I'm going to start adding some texture to it. It's not a lot of it's not a real high contrast color right now, but when I put a wash over it, it'll help bring that out a little more. All right, now I'm going to get some Citadel Nuln Oil, and very, very carefully, using great precision, I'm going to go. This is still drying, but I think back there on the rear of the gun, you can see where adding the Nuln Oil, now it brings out the contrast between the lighter and the darker silver. And because it dries matte, it's going to leave it with a duller finish, and it's going to look like old metal, something that's a little more worn and beaten and things like that. You can see it here too. You can always do more highlighting on top of this, and I may do that, but I think this will do for now. All right, I think I'm going to call this a video, and I think this will get us far enough for now. I'm probably going to start the chipping on the next video, but you never know. You know how I work. I tend to just skip around and do things that I'm drawn to at that moment. So anyway, thanks so much for watching, and thank you for being a patron. And remember, if you're not having fun in this hobby, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.